Hey guys, welcome back to Storytime with YDRC. This episode, we're going to be continuing to read Red Pyramid, the Kane Chronicles, Book 1. Last time, we left off on chapter 33, so that's what we're going to start for today. So, let's get started. Chapter 33, we go into the salsa business. You're forgetting something, Horace told me. A little busy here, I thought back. You might think it's easy steering a magic boat through the sky. You'd be wrong. I didn't have Amos's animated coat, so I stood in the back trying to shift the tiller myself, which was like stirring cement. I couldn't see where we were going. I kept tilting back and forth while Sadie tried her best to keep an unconscious Zia from flopping over the side. It's my birthday, Horace insisted. Wish me happy birthday. Happy birthday, I yelled. Now shut up! Carter, what are you on about? Sadie screamed, grabbing the railing with one hand and Zia with the other as the boat tipped sideways. Have you lost your mind? No, I was talking to... Oh, forget it. I glanced behind us. Something was approaching, a blazing figure that lit up the night. Vaguely humanoid, definitely bad news. I urged the boat to go faster. Did you get me anything? Horace urged. Will you please do something helpful? I demanded. That thing following us, is that what I think it is? Oh, Horace sounded bored. That's Sekhmet, the Eye of Ra, destroyer of the wicked, the great huntress, lady of flame, etc. Great, I thought. And she's following us because... The chief lictor has the power to summon her once during his lifetime, Horace explained. It's an old gift. It goes back to the days when Ra first blessed man with magic. Once during his lifetime, I thought, and Destard chooses now? He was never very good at being patient. I thought that the magicians don't like gods. They don't, Horace agreed. Just shows you what a hypocrite he is. But I suppose killing you was more important than standing on that principle. I can appreciate that. I looked back again. The figure was definitely getting closer. A giant golden woman in glowing red armor, with a bow in one hand and a quiver of arrows slung across her back. And she was hurtling toward us like a rocket. How do we beat her? I asked. We pretty much don't, Horace said. She's the incarnation of Sun's wrath. Back in the days when Ra was active, she would have been much more impressive, but still, she's unstoppable. A born killer, a slaying machine. Okay, I get it, I yelled. What? Sadie demanded, so loud that Zia stirred. What? Her eyes fluttered open. Nothing, I shouted. We're being followed by a slaying machine. Go back to sleep. Zia sat up woozily. A slaying machine? You don't mean... Carter, you're right, Sadie yelled. I did, and a flaming arrow the size of a predator drone grazed our port side. It exploded above us, setting the roof of our boathouse on fire. I steered the boat into a dive, and Sekhmet shot past, but then pirouetted in the air with irritating agility and dove after us. We're burning, Sadie pointed out helpfully. Noticed, I yelled back. I scanned the landscape below us, but there was nowhere safe to land, just subdivisions and office parks. Die, enemies of Ra, Sekhmet yelled. Perish in agony. She's almost as annoying as you, I told Horace. Impossible, Horace said. No one bests Horace. I took another evasive turn, and Zia yelled, There! She pointed toward a well-lit factory complex with trucks, warehouses, and silos. A giant chili pepper was painted on the side of the biggest warehouse, and a floodlit sign read, Magic Salsa Inc. Oh, please, Sadie said. It's not really magic. That's just a name. No, Zia insisted. I've got an idea. Those 7 ribbons, I guessed. The ones he used on Sarkhet? Zia shook her head. They can only be summoned once a year. But my plan... Another arrow blazed past us, only inches from our starboard side. Hang on! I yanked at the tiller and spun the boat upside down, just before the arrow exploded. The hull shielded us from the brunt of the blast, but the entire bottom of the ship was now on fire, and we were going down. With my last bit of control, I aimed the boat toward the roof of the warehouse, and we crashed through, slamming into a huge mound of something crunchy. I clawed my way clear of the boat and sat up in a daze. Fortunately, the stuff we'd crashed into was soft. Unfortunately, it was a 20-foot pile of dried chili peppers, and the boat had set them on fire. My eyes began to sting, but I knew better than to rub them, because my hands were now covered in chili oil. Sadie, I called. Zia? Help! Sadie yelled. She was on the other side of the boat, dragging Zia out from under the flaming hull. We managed to pull her free and slide down the pile onto the floor. The warehouse seemed to be a massive facility for drying peppers, with 30 or 40 mountains of chilies and rows of wooden drying racks. The wreckage for our boat filled the air with spicy smoke, and through the hole we'd made in the roof, I could see the blazing figure of Sekhmet descending. We ran, flying through another pile of peppers. No, I didn't pick a peck of them, Sadie. Just shut up. We hid behind a drying rack where shelves of peppers made the air burn like hydrochloric acid. Sekhmet landed, and the warehouse floor shuddered up. Up close, she was even more terrifying. Her skin glowed like liquid gold, and her chest armor and skirt seemed to be woven of tiles made from molten lava. Her hair was like a thick lion's mane. Her eyes were feline, but they didn't sparkle like bats or betray any kindness or humor. Sekhmet's eyes blazed like her arrows, designed only to seek and destroy. She was beautiful the way an atomic explosion is beautiful. I smell blood, she roared. I will feast on enemies of Ra until my belly is full. Charming, Sadie whispered. So, Zia, this plan? Zia didn't look so well. She was shivering and pale and seemed to have trouble focusing on us. When he first called Sekhmet to punish humans because they were rebelling against him, she got out of hand. Hard to imagine, I whispered, as Sekhmet ripped through the burning wreckage of our boat. She started killing everyone, Zia said, not just the wicked. None of the other gods could stop her. She would just kill all day until she was gorged on blood. Then she'd leave until the next day. So the people begged the magicians to come up with a plan, and you dare hide? Flames roared as Sekhmet's arrows destroyed pile after pile of dried peppers. I will roast you alive! Run now, I decided. Talk later. Sadie and I dragged Zia between us. We'd managed to get out of the warehouse just before the whole place imploded from the heat, billowing a spicy hot mushroom cloud into the sky. We ran through a parking lot filled with semi-trailers and hid behind a 16-wheeler. I peeked out, expecting to see Sekhmet walk through the flames of the warehouse. Instead, she leaped out in the form of a giant lion. Her eyes blazed, and floating over her head was the disk of fire like a miniature sun. Symbol of Ra, Zia whispered. Sekhmet roared. Where are you, my tasty morsels? She opened her maw and breathed a blast of hot air across the parking lot. Wherever her breath touched, the asphalt melted, cars disintegrated into sand, and the parking lot turned to barren desert. How did she do that? Sadie hissed. Her breath creates the deserts, Zia said. That's the legend. Better and better. Fear was closing up in my throat, but I knew we couldn't hide much longer. I summoned my sword. I'll distract her. You two run. No, Zia insisted. There is another way. She pointed at a row of silos on the other side of the lot. Each one was 3 stories tall and maybe 20 feet in diameter, with a giant chili pepper painted on the side. Petrol tanks? Sadie asked. No, I said. Must be salsa, right? Sadie stared at me blankly. Isn't that a type of music? It's a hot sauce, I said. That's what they make here. Sekhmet breathed in our direction, and 3 trailers next to us melted into sand. We scuttled sideways and jumped behind a cinder block wall. Listen, Zia gasped, her face beading with sweat. When the people needed to stop Sekhmet, they got huge vats of beer and colored them bright red with pomegranate juice. Yeah, I remember now, I interrupted. They told Sekhmet it was blood, and she drank until she passed out. Then Ra was able to recall her into the heavens. They transformed her into something gentler, a cow goddess or something. Hathor, Zia said. That is Sekhmet's other form, the flip side of her personality. Sadie shook her head in disbelief. So you're saying we offer to buy Sekhmet a few pints, and she'll turn into a cow? Not exactly, Zia said, but salsa is red, is it not? We skirted the factory grounds as Sekhmet chewed up trucks and blasted huge swaths of the parking lot to sand. I hate this plan, Sadie grumbled. Just keep her occupied for a few seconds, I said, and don't die. Yeah, that's the hard bit, isn't it? 1, I counted, 2, 3. Sadie burst into the open and used her favorite spot. Ha-dee! The glyphs blazed over Sekhmet's head, and everything around her exploded. Trucks burst into pieces. The air shimmered with energy. The ground heaved upward, creating a crater 50 feet deep into which the lioness tumbled. It was pretty impressive, but I didn't have time to admire Sadie's work. I turned into a falcon and launched myself toward the salsa tanks. Roar! Sekhmet leaped out of the crater and breathed desert wind in Sadie's direction. But Sadie was long gone. She ran sideways, ducking behind trailers and releasing new lengths of magical rope as she fled. The ropes whipped through the air and tried to tie themselves around the lioness's mouth. They failed, of course, but they did annoy the destroyer. Show yourself, Sekhmet bellowed. I will feast on your flesh. Perched in a silo, I concentrated all my power and turned straight from falcon to avatar. My glowing form was so heavy, its feet sank into the top of the tank. Sekhmet, I yelled. The lioness whirled and snarled, trying to locate my voice. Up here, kitty, I called. She spotted me and her ears went back. Horus? Unless you know another guy with a falcon head. She patted back and forth uncertainly, then roared and challenged. Why do you speak to me when I am in my raging form? You know I must destroy everything in my path, even you! If you must, I said, but first, you might like to feast on the blood of your enemies. I drove my sword into the tank and salsa gushed out in a chunky red waterfall. I leaped to the next tank and sliced it open, and again until 6 silofuls of magic salsa were spewing into the parking lot. Ha ha! Sekhmet loved it. She leaped into the red sauce torrent, rolling in it, lapping it up. Blood! Lovely blood! Yeah, apparently lions aren't too bright, or their taste buds aren't very developed, because Sekhmet didn't stop until her belly was bulging, and her mouth literally began to smoke. Tangy, she said, stumbling and blinking. But my eyes hurt. What kind of blood is this? Nubian? Persian? Jalapeno, I said. Try some more. It gets better. Her ears were smoking too now, as she tried to drink more. Her eyes watered, and she began to stagger. Steam curled from her mouth. Hot mouth. Milk is good for that, I suggested. Maybe if you were a cat. Tricked, Sekhmet groaned. You tricked. But her eyes were too heavy. She turned in a circle and collapsed, curling into a ball. Her form twitched and shimmered as her red armor melted into spots on her golden skin, until I was looking down at an enormous sleeping cow. I dropped off the silo and stepped carefully around the sleeping goddess. She was making cow snoring sounds like moos, moos. I waved my hand in front of her face, and when I was convinced she was out cold, I dispelled my avatar. Sadie and Zia emerged from behind a trailer. Well, said Sadie, that was different. I will never eat salsa again, I decided. You both did wonderfully, Zia said, but your boat is burned. How do we get to Phoenix? We? Sadie said. I don't recall inviting you. Zia's face turned salsa red. Surely you don't still think I led you into a trap? I don't know, Sadie said. Did you? I couldn't believe I was hearing this. Sadie, My voice sounded dangerously angry, even to myself. Lay off! Zia summoned that pillar of fire thing. She sacrificed her magic to save us. And she told us how to beat the lioness. We need her. Sadie stared at me. She glanced back and forth between Zia and me, probably trying to judge how far she could push things. Fine. She crossed her arms and pouted. But we need to find Amos first. No, Zia said. That would be a very bad idea. Oh, so we can trust you but not Amos? Zia hesitated. I got the feeling that was exactly what she meant. But she decided to try a different approach. Amos would not want you to wait. He said to keep going, didn't he? If he survived Sekhmet, he'll find us on the road. If not... Sadie huffed. So how do we get to Phoenix? Walk? I gazed across the parking lot, where one 16-wheeler was still intact. Maybe we don't have to. I took off the linen coat I'd borrowed from Amos's supply locker. Zia almost had a way of animating his coat so that it could steer his boat. Do you know the spell? She nodded. It's fairly simple with the right ingredients. I could do it if I had my magic. Can you teach me? She pursed her lips. The hardest part is the figurine. The first time you enchant the piece of clothing, you need to smash a shabti into the fabric and speak a binding charm that will meld them together. It would require a clay or wax figure that has already been imbued with the spirit. Sadie and I looked at each other and simultaneously said, Doughboy! Chapter 34. Doughboy gives us a ride. I summoned Dad's magic toolkit out of the duat and grabbed our little legless friend. Doughboy, we need to talk. Doughboy opened his wax eyes. Finally, you realize how stuffy it is in there. At last, you've remembered that you need my brilliant guidance. Actually, we need you to become a coat, just for a while. His tiny mouth fell open. Do I look like an article of clothing? I am the Lord of all knowledge, the mighty... I smashed him into my jacket. I wadded up, threw it on the pavement, and stepped on it. Zia, what's that spell? She told me the words, and I repeated the chant. The coat inflated and hovered in front of me. It brushed itself off and ruffled its collar. If coats can look indignant, this one did. Sadie eyed it suspiciously. Can it drive a lorry with no feet or for the pedals? Shouldn't be a problem, Zia said. It's a nice long coat. I sighed with relief. For a moment, I'd imagined myself having to animate my pants, too. That could get awkward. Drive us to Phoenix, I told the coat. The coat made a rude gesture at me, or at least it would have been rude if the coat had hands, and then it floated into the driver's seat. The cab was bigger than I thought. Behind the seat was a curtained area with a full-sized bed, which Sadie claimed immediately. I'll let you and Zia have some quality time, she told me. Just the two of you in your coat. She ducked behind the curtains before I could smack her. The coat drove us west on I-10 as a bank of dark clouds swallowed the stars. The air smelled like rain. After a long time, Zia cleared her throat. Carter, I'm sorry about... I wish the circumstances were better. Yeah, I guess. I said, I guess you'll get in a lot of trouble with the house. I will be shunned, she said, my staff broken, my name blotted from the books. I'll be cast into exile, assuming they don't kill me. I thought about Zia's little shrine in the first gnome, all those pictures of her village and her family that she didn't remember. As she talked about getting exiled, she had the same expression on her face that she had worn then. Not regret nor sadness, more like confusion, as if she herself couldn't figure out why she was rebelling, or what the first gnome had meant to her. She'd said Iskandar was like her only family. Now she had no one. You could come with us, I said. She glanced over. We were sitting close together, and I was very aware of her shoulder pressing against mine. Even with the reek of burned peppers on both of us, I could smell her Egyptian perfume. She had a dried chili stuck in her hair, and somehow that made her look even cuter. Sadie says my brain was just addled. Seriously, Sadie, I don't interrupt this much when you're telling the story. Anyway, Zia looked at me sadly. Where would we go, Carter? Even if you defeat Set and save this continent, what will you do? The house will hunt you down. The gods will make your life miserable. We'll figure it out, I promised. I'm used to traveling. I'm good at improvising, and Sadie's not all bad. I heard that, Sadie's muffled voice came through the curtain. And with you, I continued. I mean, with your magic, things would be easier. Zia squeezed my hand, which sent a tingle up my arm. You're kind, Carter, but you don't know me. Not really. I suppose Iskandar saw this coming. What do you mean? Zia took her hand away, which kind of bummed me out. When Desjardins and I came back from the British Museum, Iskandar spoke to me privately. He said I was in danger. He said he would take me somewhere safe, and her eyebrows knit together. That's odd. I don't remember. A cold feeling started gnawing at me. Wait, did he take you somewhere safe? I think so. She shook her head. No, he couldn't have. Obviously. I'm still here. Perhaps he didn't have time. He sent me to find you in New York almost immediately. Outside, a light rain began to fall. The coat turned on our windshield wipers. I didn't understand what Zia had told me. Perhaps Iskandar had sensed a change in Desjardins, and he was trying to protect his favorite student. But something else about the story bothered me. Something I couldn't quite put a finger on. Zia stared into the rain as she saw bad things out there in the night. We're running out of time, she said. He's coming back. Who's coming back? She looked at me urgently. The thing I needed to tell you. The thing you need. It's Set's secret name. The storm surged. Thunder crackled, and the truck shuddered in the wind. Hold on, I stammered. How could you know Set's name? How did you even know we needed it? You stole Desjardins' book. Desjardins told us about it. He said it didn't matter. He said you could not use the spell without Set's secret name, which is impossible to get. So how do you know it? Thoth said it could only come from Set himself, or from the person. My voice trailed off, as a horrible thought occurred to me, or from the person closest to him. Zia shut her eyes as if in pain. I can't explain it, Carter. I just have this voice telling me the name. The fifth goddess, I said, Nephthys. You were there too at the British Museum. Zia looked completely stunned. No, that's impossible. Iskandar said you were in danger. He wanted to take you somewhere safe. That's what he meant. You're a godling. She shook her head stubbornly. But he didn't take me away. I'm right here. If I were hosting a god, the other magicians of the house would have figured out days ago. They know me too well. They would have noticed the changes in my magic. Desjardins would have destroyed me. She had a point, but then another terrible thought occurred to me. Unless Set is controlling him, I said. Carter, are you really so blind? Desjardins is not Set. Because you think it's Amos, I said. Amos, who risked his life to save us, who told us to keep going without him. Besides, Set doesn't need human form. He's using the pyramid, which you know because I hesitated. Amos told us. This is getting us nowhere, Zia said. I know Set's secret name, and I can tell you, but you must promise you will not tell Amos. Oh, come on! Besides, if you know the name, why can't you just use it yourself? She shook her head, looking almost as frustrated as I felt. I don't know why. I just know it's not my role to play. It must be you or Sadie, blood of the pharaohs. If you don't... The truck slowed abruptly. Out the front windshield, about 20 yards ahead, a man in a blue coat was standing in our headlights. It was Amos. His clothes were tattered like he'd been sprayed with a shotgun, but otherwise he looked okay. Before the truck had even stopped completely, I jumped out of the cab and ran to meet him. Amos! I cried. What happened? I distracted Sekhmet, he said, putting a finger through one of the holes in his coat. For about 11 seconds. I'm glad to see you survived. There was a salsa factory. I started to explain, but Amos held up his hand. Time for explanations later, he said. Right now we have to get going. He pointed northwest, and I saw what he meant. The storm was worse up ahead, a lot worse. A wall of black blotted out the night sky. The mountains, the highway, as if it would swallow the whole world. Set's storm is gathering, Amos said with a twinkle in his eyes. Shall we drive into it? All right, so we still have time for one more chapter, so we're going to continue. Chapter 35, Men Ask for Directions and Other Signs of the Apocalypse. I don't know how I managed it with Carter and Zia yammering, but I got some sleep in the back of the truck. Even after the excitement of seeing Amos alive, as soon as we got going again, I was back in the bunk and drifting off. I suppose a good Hadi spell can really take it out of you. Naturally, my ba took this as an opportunity to travel. Heaven forbid I get some peaceful rest. I found myself back in London on the banks of the Thames. Cleopatra's Needle rose up in front of me. It was a gray day, cool and calm, and even the smell of low tide muck made me feel homesick. Isis stood next to me in a cloud white dress, her dark hair braided with diamonds. Her multicolored wings faded in and out behind her like the northern lights. Your parents had the right idea, she said. Bast was failing. She was my friend, I said. Yes, a good and loyal servant. But chaos cannot be kept down forever. It grows. It seeps into the cracks of civilization. It breaks down the edges. It cannot be kept in balance. That is simply its nature. The obelisk rumbled, glowing faintly. Today it is the American continent, Isis mused. But unless the gods are rallied, unless we achieve our full strength, chaos will soon destroy the entire human world. We're doing our best, I insisted. We'll be set. Isis looked at me sadly. You know that's not what I mean. Set is only the beginning. The image changed, and I saw London in ruins. I'd seen some horrific photos of the Blitz in World War II, but that was nothing compared to this. The city was leveled, rubble and dust for miles, and the Thames choked with flotsam. The only thing standing was the obelisk, and as I watched, it began to crack open, all four sides peeling away like some ghastly flower unfolding. Don't show me this, I pleaded. It will happen soon enough, Isis said, as your mother foresaw. But if you cannot face it, the scene changed again. We stood in the throne room of a palace, the same one I'd seen before, where Set had entombed Osiris. The gods were gathering, materializing as streams of light shot through the throne room, curled round the pillars, and took on human form. One became Thoth with his stained lab coat, his wire-rimmed glasses, and his hair standing out all over his head. Another became Horus, the proud young warrior with silver and gold eyes. Sobek, the crocodile god, whipped his watery staff and snarled at me. A mass of scorpions scuttled behind a column and emerged on the other side as Circuit, the brown-robed arachnid goddess. Then my heart leaped, because I noticed a boy in black standing in the shadows behind the throne, Anubis, his dark eyes studying me with regret. He pointed at the throne, and I saw it was empty. The palace was missing its heart. The room was cold and dark, and it was impossible to believe this had once been a place of celebrations. Isis turned to me. We need a ruler. Horus must become pharaoh. He must unite the gods and the house of life. It is the only way. You can't mean Carter, I said. My mess of a brother, Pharaoh? Are you joking? We have to help him, you and I. The idea was so ridiculous that I would have laughed had the gods not been staring at me so gravely. Help him? I said. Why doesn't he help me become Pharaoh? There have been strong women pharaohs, Isis admitted. Hatshepsut ruled well for many years. Nefertiti's power was equal to her husband's. But you have a different path, Sadie. Your power will not come from sitting on a throne. I think you know this. I looked at the throne, and I realized Isis had a point. The idea of sitting there with a crown on my head, trying to rule this lot of bad-tempered gods, did not appeal to me in the slightest. Still, Carter? You've grown strong, Sadie, Isis said. I don't think you realize how strong. Soon, we will face the test together. We will prevail if you maintain your courage and faith. Courage and faith, I said. Not my two strong suits. Your moment comes, Isis said. We depend on you. The guards gathered round, staring at me expectantly. They began to crowd in, pressing so close I couldn't breathe, grabbing my arms, shaking me. I woke to Zia poking my shoulder. Sadie, we've stopped. I instinctively reached for my wand. What? Where? Zia pushed aside the curtains of the sleeping berth and leaned over me from the front seat, unnervingly like a vulture. Amos and Carter were in the gas station. You need to be prepared to move. Why? I sat up and looked out the windshield, straight into a raging sandstorm. Oh, the sky was black, so it was impossible to tell if it was day or night. Through the gale of wind and sand, I could see we were parked in the front of a lighted petrol station. We're in Phoenix, Zia said, but most of the city is shut down. People are evacuating. Time? 4:30 in the morning, Zia said. Magic isn't working very well. The closer we get to the mountain, the worse it is. And the truck's GPS system is down. Amos and Carter went inside to ask directions. That didn't sound promising. If two male magicians were desperate enough to stop for directions, we were in dire straits. The truck's cab shook in the howling wind. After all we'd been through, I felt silly being scared of a storm, but I climbed over the seat so I could sit next to Zia and have some company. How long have they been in there? I asked. Not long, Zia said. I wanted to talk to you before they come back. I raised an eyebrow. About Carter? Well, if you're wondering whether he likes you, the way he stammers might be an indication. Zia frowned. No, I'm asking if I mind? Very considerate. I must say, at first I had my doubts with you threatening to kill us and all, but I've decided you're not a bad sort, and Carter's mad about you, so it's not about Carter. I wrinkled my nose. Oops, could you just forget what I said, then? It's about Set. God, I sighed. Not this again. Still suspicious of Amos? You're blind not to see it, Zia said. Set loves deception and traps. It is his favorite way to kill. Part of me knew she had a point. No doubt you'll think I was foolish not to listen. But have you ever sat by someone while someone talks badly about a member of your family? Even if it's not your favorite relative, the natural reaction is to defend them. At least it was for me. Possibly because I didn't have that much family to begin with. Look, Zia, I can't believe Amos wouldn't, Zia agreed, but Set can bend the mind and control the body. I'm not a specialist on possession, but it was a very common problem in ancient times. Minor demons are difficult enough to dislodge. A major god? He's not possessed. He can't be, I winced. A sharp pain was burning in my palm. In the spot where I'd last held the feather of truth. But I wasn't telling a lie. I did believe Amos was innocent. Didn't I? Zia studied my expression. You need Amos to be all right. He is your uncle. You've lost too many members of your family. I understand that. I wanted to snap back that she didn't understand anything, but her tone made me suspect she had known grief. Possibly even more than I. We've got no choice, I said. There's what, 3 hours till sunrise? Amos knows the best way into the mountain. Trap or no, we have to go there and try to stop Set. I could almost see the gears spinning in her head as she searched for some way, any way to convince me. All right, she said at last. I wanted to tell Carter something, but I never got the opportunity. I'll tell you instead. The last thing you need to stop Set. You couldn't possibly know his secret name. Zia held my gaze. Maybe it was the feather of truth, but I was certain she wasn't bluffing. She did have the name of Set. Or at least she believed she did. And honestly, I'd overheard bits of her conversation with Carter while she was while I was in the back of the cab. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to. I looked at Zia and tried to believe she was hosting Nephthys, but it didn't make any sense. I'd spoken with Nephthys. She had told me she was far away in some sort of sleeping host, and Zia was right here in front of me. It will work, Zia insisted, but I can't do it. It must be you. Why not use it yourself? I demanded. Because you spent all your magic? She waved away the question. Just promise me you will use it now, on Amos, before we reach the mountain. It may be your only chance. And if you're wrong, we waste the only chance we have, and the book disappears once it's used, right? Grudgingly, Zia nodded. Once read, the book will dissolve and appear somewhere else in the world. But if you wait any longer, we're doomed. If Set lures you into his base of power, you'll never have the strength to confront him. Sadie, please. Tell me the name, I said. I promise you, I'll use it at the right time. Now is the right time. I hesitated, hoping Isis would drop some words of wisdom, but the goddess was silent. I didn't know if I would have relented. Perhaps things would have agreed to turn out differently if I'd agreed to Zia's plan. But before I could make that choice, the truck's doors opened, and Amos and Carter climbed in with a gust of sand. We're close, Amos smiled, as if this were good news. Very, very close. All right, guys, that's going to end off this episode of Red Pyramid, the Kane Chronicles, Book 1. As always, before I end it off for today, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That's it. Bye, guys.